All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Debate Club, a platform where we engage in healthy debates and discussions on various topics. The topic for this week is the Russian invasion of Ukraine was provoked by NATO's actions. Agree or disagree? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is an international military alliance of 32 member states who agree to defend each other against third party attacks. It was formed after the Second World War to represent Western interests and counter Russian influence in Europe. This week's topic seeks to understand if NATO's actions are the cause for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Arguments for the topic can be based on the fact that Russia views NATO's expansion as directed against its interests. Russia claims that Western leaders promised not to expand NATO eastward, but this promise was allegedly broken. Russia perceives NATO's eastward march as a threat to its security. Arguments against the same can take into consideration the fact that NATO's founding articles allow any European country meeting membership criteria to join, including Ukraine. Countries like Poland and Hungary have also sought integration into the West earlier. In this scenario, the US claims that a ban on NATO's expansion was never on the table. With that context in place, I now declare the floor open for debate. If you wish to get a chance to speak, please raise your hand using the reaction button. You'll be given your chance in the order of raised hands. Thank you. I see Samarth raising his hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Hello. So I think the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it was provoked due to the actions of NATO. One of the arguments that I hear against this train of thought is like how NATO is purely like a defensive alliance, and the one of the NATO articles, what it says is each of the member states it's gonna defend. Uh, the member state only if it is under attack, and not support that any member state directing its aggression towards the non-member state. But I believe this is uh, this is like a false statement under various circumstances, because the things between the territorial the fights between countries, it is always going to be ambiguous, and it won't be like clear sided who is the aggressor in that case, or who is the victim. This can be observed in the territorial fights between any countries, and not just related to our present discussion. So coming to our present discussion, the territories between Russia and Ukraine, that even that will be contested and ambiguous, and each of the parties can claim under various circumstances that they are the aggrieved ones. So in the context of Ukraine, for example, the Crimean Peninsula, that will always be a flashpoint. So even though nominally it is under the territory of Ukraine, so the Russia has many interests in it, and for example, the Russian Black Sea Fleet that is based in that part of Ukraine, and also a majority of the population of Crimea, it is going. They are ethnic Russians. So this is always going to be a flashpoint between Russia and Ukraine, and how this problem could have been solved before was Ukraine not entering into this kind of security alliance. Now that it had planned to enter the security alliance, so you can see how any this inevitable flashpoint would have been, would have led to like a larger conflict. So it's like globalizing a conflict which had been localized, and it's uh, uh, trying to draw a clear boundary between a conflict which is already ambiguous, in which the the aggressor and the victim there. It's not like a clear cut. Yeah, so that will be my comments for the time being.
Thank you so much, Samarth. So Samarth believes that NATO's actions are a cause for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the on the decision on the part of Ukraine to enter the security alliance is also a thing that has caused this invasion. And in absence of such a decision on part of Ukraine, may not have globalized such a local issue. So thank you so much, Samarth. Is there anybody else who wants to go ahead? Anyone who wants to speak can use the reaction button to raise your hands. I see Ashwin Ravi Shankar. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to say something. Uh, Actually, there were protests held in Ukraine. The people, they wanted to be pro-West, actually. Pro-West meaning aligned with their economy and not necessarily have a military alliance with them, but open up their door to the West for trading. So, Samarth, what is your view on that? I mean, the people themselves, I mean, democratically, they wanted to align with the West, as the West was is more economically well off. So don't you think that also led to the invasion of Russia, invasion by Russia?
Thank you so much, Ashwin. I think he has posed a question to Samarth. Samarth, I'll let you answer after Suri has spoken. Is that fine?
Okay, that is fine.
Okay, thank you. Suri, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Um, I think as Samar pointed out, it's not like a simple question why some of these wars are provoked and all. But, in this context, at least, there was definitely some provocation type things happening among other things, Russia wanted to kind of hold their territory and all. I'll just give a historical example actually. So at one point of time when communism was like doing strong around 1970s or 80s, I don't remember exactly the time. Carter was president at that point of time, if I'm not wrong. So Russia had a good alliance with Cuba, and so they were they were intending to deploy their missiles in Cuba, which they had a military alliance with. And US had declared that if in the northwestern hemisphere any of the other major powers put their weapon, they will consider that as a sign of war. They declared that, and they did not let them put that missiles there. Now, with NATO slowly barging on their door, if they are able to put missiles right in front of Ukraine, Russia, of course, won't be happy. You got to understand from historical context point of view, Russia and US were like fierce competitors, and even if Russia is lagging a little bit behind, they are a little bit proud people, and at least the pride does continue in the oligarchy and the political ecosystem. So they would not be willing to back down, because if they do back down, it would not be taken rightfully within the country. So with that in the context, in some ways, by trying to involve Ukraine in NATO and everything, right, putting missiles right in front of their house, they of course won't be unhappy. I don't think so. This was a unilateral reason, but I think provocation from West definitely was one of the causes of this war. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suri. Those were some great points. Is there anybody? Oh, I think Ashwin had posed a question earlier to Samarth. Samarth, do you wish to answer that?
Sure. Ashwin posed a very good question of why can't the Ukrainian people choose for themselves at least not if they want to join a military alliance. Cannot they choose like an economic agreement which is beneficial for them? So for that, I would say like if you look at what the Ukrainian regime prior to that protest in 2014, what it actually intended to do was like uh, uh, keep a balance, stay like equidistant between our Russia and European Union in terms of economic arrangements too. So previously, it was involved in talks to enter into an economic agreement exclusively with EU, but then it thought it would be wise not to like take to take sides, but to like be equidistant and enter into economic talks with both EU and Russia simultaneously, and each reach some sort of simultaneous agreement with them. But however, the following protests, that happened, it forced the Ukrainian regime to backtrack on this one and pursue talks with EU, with the European Union exclusively. And finally, that uh, regime which inclined to maintain this balance, it was overthrown, and a regime which wanted to like purely, side with the European Union in terms of this economic arrangements that came into place, and that same regime was seeking to eventually join NATO, and this European Union agreement, it was just like a prelude to that eventual accession to NATO. So it was like the uh, all of the pieces that was required for Ukraine to reach this long-time economic prosperity, they were already in place. And the protests, I think those were short-sighted, and it actually dragged back Ukraine in all possible ways, including economically, by forcing it to take sides, uh, basically. So that is why I think that the Ukrainian protests were short-sighted, and also they were by no means representing of all sections of the Ukrainian people, because even then a significant minority, uh, they wanted to side with Russia, and more than that, the vast majority of the country, they wanted to maintain the balance between uh, siding with Russia and the European Union. Uh, so, the actual percentage of the population in Ukraine who wanted to side exclusively with the European Union were actually quite in the minority. But unfortunately, that is what ended up happening, anyways. Yeah, so that will be my reply.
Thank you so much. Ashwin, you can go ahead.
Okay, my question is, the Ukraine-Russia war that is going on, what factors does it actually depend on? I mean, because I see there were people in Russia who were protesting against the invasion as well. I mean, as soon as the invasion happened, Russian people went down to the streets and they protested against the invasion, they themselves. And also, if you see that Putin is an absolute dictator, like he has a lot of power. So don't you think that is the major cause? I mean, if there was democracy really present in Russia, maybe they wouldn't have invaded. And another question I would ask is, there are other countries out there like Sweden, which wasn't a part of NATO. And historically, there was an enmity between Russia and Sweden. So why did Russia choose to invade Ukraine and not Sweden or Latvia or Estonia or the third country below it? There are other countries as well. Why was Ukraine the target? And if so, I mean, do you think it is only due to the West, or it is also because of lack of democracy and more dictatorship in Russia?
Thank you, Ashwin.
You know,
Next up will be Prince.
just like a 30-second reply, if that is fine.
Maybe you
I,
could go after Prince. Is that fine with you?
pardon?
Uh, is it okay if you go after Prince? Like once
I
he
would
has.
just like to say that if anyone like wants to you know get these questions answered, they can go through some of the points that I had collated yesterday, because I had specifically spoken about these points, like related to Russian democracy and why Russia prioritizes Ukraine over other neighboring countries. I would just
Why
like
don't we just
to point that out.
uh, yes, Amal, I think you can respond like right now to Ashwin's question, and then later on, whatever question the participants have, we'll take them into the unmoderated session.
Sure. So I don't want to like reiterate what I have already said. Like maybe I'll just point out that Ashwin, like can you look at the points in the fact sheet, like number 14 and 15, if that is okay with you. I know maybe that will answer your questions, because I don't want to like take up the time right now when other people want to speak.
Okay,
I
number
don't
14 is
want
the
to
culture
make this like a
language.
one-on-one.
The culture
Please
language,
don't
that point, right?
cut him off. Please don't cut him off. Once he's done, you can speak.
Yes, I meant that one itself, Ashwin. Yeah, number 14 and 15.
Okay, I'll read it and get back to you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Ashwin and Samarth. Prince, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Firstly, I'd like to say that, I'm audible first of all. Yeah, Rose, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Prince. Go ahead.
Thanks. So, firstly, I'd just like to say that Russian invasion of Ukraine was something that would have happened. We were just waiting when will it happen, because uh, the constant ignorance of the authority and power of Russia in the international organization by the UN, by the US and the EU, is something that was hurting the Russian pride. Additionally, some people made really great points. I'll just like to give a contrary viewpoint to this. Firstly, why were protests held in Ukraine to join NATO and EU and organizations like that? Firstly, all protests are not organic. On the contrary, most of the protests are not organic. We need to go a year or two before this protest, because the Ukrainian president came to pass saying that he will make sure that Ukraine stays a neutral country, and there is no attempt of Ukraine into going towards the NATO. The importance of Ukraine is very important, and I guess Ashwin also pointed out that why Sweden or Latvia or Lithuania was not invaded, but on the contrary, country like Ukraine was invaded. It's simply because of the geography of the region. Russia is blessed with a great geography that acts as a defense to its borders, except for the region of Ukraine, because that is a complete plain, farmlands, greenlands, through which the tanks could move. And if the tanks are involved in any war, then between a war between West and the Russian Union, then I would assume that the Russian Federation will lose with that kind of advantage that the European Union possesses. So it was just because of the threat of the European Union and NATO tanks on their borders. Additionally, uh, I see a lot of people, questioning the democracy of Russia and how there is an autocratic ruler, that being Vladimir Putin. But we don't really understand that democracy is not actually the solution to all the societies and civilizations. Because some societies are like that, which favor and which like, being ruled by or being represented by a person with a great aura and a great personality. The quote unquote gangster vibe that Vladimir Putin possesses around him. it is deeply embedded within the Russian society. It is not that he is just suppressing the opposition rulers, it is also that people like that kind of personality to represent their nation for the nation's pride and rejuvenation of the quote unquote old Soviet pride and union. So it's just that the Russian community or the Russian country is that they just like that kind of partially autocratic leaders. This is something we can see in the all the czars that have succeeded. All of the czars who are currently mentioned in the Russian history in golden words are a bit autocratic. So yeah, Rose.
Thank you so much, Prince. Next up will be Suri. Suri, are you there?
Thank you, Rose. Yeah, just trying to find the unmute button. Uh, Thank you. I think Ravi probably raised Ravi Shankar, if I terrible with it. Ashwin, sorry, Ashwin raised the question like, there were some people protesting even in Russia. Like now in India also there is a sentiment brewing like, probably somewhere like, we should attack this and take over this, that. There are there in some part. Suppose some things happen and we do end up going in that direction. I would be the one who would be persisting like, I don't think so we should attack Pakistan or like, Bangladesh or anything like that. Two simple reasons. First of all, it directly affects me, and second of all, it doesn't really get anything useful to the country. Second of all, when we do have war, it is devastating. Some of the people would always hold opinions like this, and there would be some people who would be protesting it. There would be other set of people who would be quite glad with that, like, finally we're getting the glory that we deserve, like, finally India would be whole or whatever. Like, some people might have that fantasy. So like just having a protest is not enough. It might represent something, but we don't exactly know what it represents. That this plays out like there are some people who might be interested in the other direction. Whenever a country does something, that doesn't mean everybody in the country is aligned with that. That barely means everybody representing people in the country are aligned with that, right? So India has come up with so many policies. Like a lot of representatives within the government do not agree with that for their own reasons. And if you will take it to the masses, even lesser people will agree with that. So that's just another bit. It's very, very challenging to decipher it. It's not a perfect science to be able to say that if this is happening, there was some protest held. Like it was actually it was people's will, or like everybody wanted just exactly opposite, or even majority wanted something exactly opposite. Um, and on the front of war in general, I think there were like some other reasons as well. Like when USSR broke out, I think Prince pointed out some very good reasons for defensive purposes. And also, like in terms of oil reserves and all of that, like Ukraine is like, and the areas that Russia is trying to annex specifically are rich in the natural resources that it has been craving, and things that it might revitalize its economy. So that was one of the reasons for annexation of Crimea. And the backing reason that they had is it has a major Russian population, Russian speaking population. Now, if somebody speaks a language, does that mean they should be part of one country or the other? Is very, very challenging topic to be able to kind of say conclusively, because speaking a language is speaking a language, and being part of country is two different things, because it comes with its implications, political, linguistic, cultural, and everything. And very difficult to determine in this dynamic world where like no even things like that have a dramatic effect. How does it exactly play out? Thank you.
Great insight, Suri. Is there anybody who wants to go next? Yes, please, Ashwin.
Yeah, does anybody have any estimates as to how many Ukrainians want to surrender to Russia and how many want to continue to fight? The same for estimates of Russia as to how many want to wage the war and how many doesn't want to wage the war. I mean, some rough estimates. I mean, does anybody have?
Uh, I have like an idea about how many Ukrainians they favored joining NATO over the years. This data was collected, the survey was done over the years, and what was observed was prior to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, prior to 2014, the majority of the Ukrainians they were against joining NATO, but they weren't like properly represented in the leadership. So there was this mismatch between what the citizens wanted and what the leaders wanted. But after the Russian conflict, after 2014, and especially after the 2022 invasion, the number of Ukrainians who want to join NATO now they are in the majority. So yeah,
Can you
it
please
has
repeat the
had
last
the.
sentence again?
So after 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, and especially after 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the the people of Ukraine who want to actually join with NATO, they are in the majority. So there has been a drastic shift in public opinion. Uh, right. So that is one statistic that I'm aware of related to this question.
I believe your question has been answered, Ashwin. Is there anything else you'd like to ask or any inputs? I guess not. Is there anybody who wants to go next?
Actually, Suri counted something in the chat. Suri, can you come up with a verbal explanation or something?
Oh, I was saying, like, I think you were asking for statistics. I was saying I don't have any. And second is it's wartime, so the opinions change over time as well. Like, some people who would have been mobilized or something. Uh, Wartime is very interesting. It affects ideologies faster than anything because like there are rumors that spread. There are like some real factual things that come out, and then people have new experiences which are much more stronger. Like for example, somebody who is fighting in from Ukraine side who was fighting the war, they died with like Russian bullets. Now they are not exactly very keen on being neutral to the Russia. So and there would be a lot of it, like some people and some people would have to rip their life apart and move to different countries and all of that. Either way, the opinions change very very dramatically on the either side, and that makes it even more challenging. I think Samarth is pointing out the surge of nationalism in Ukraine. Like whenever you have wartime, there is always a surge in nationalism. Like else, it is just not feasible to be able to sustain any kind of war if like people who are fighting in it don't have their heart in it. And I think both the sides too are committed to this intent. Like Ukraine a little bit more because they are defending, and Russia, well, they are attacking. So the morale would always be a little bit lower on that side.
Thank you, Suri. Anyone who wants to speak next, please use the reaction button to raise your hands. Yes, please, Prince.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I just found it funny that someone pointed out that speaking a language does not mean, where you are in one country. And I understand where we are coming from because we live in India. It is a nation of like more than 1,000 languages. But when we talk of Europe, then the countries were divided based on linguistic basis, as in those who speak Germans will be there will be a random boundary of the regions of the German speaking population and things like that. So I guess when the Russian people see outside their boundaries, as in Ukraine and areas like that, first of all, they see familiarity that, okay, these are our people because it's the same culture, it's the same language, it's the same food, everything. Additionally, what they believe is, okay, if the countries in the Western Europe are divided based on linguistic basis, then the regions of Donbass and Crimea should be assimilated into the Russian Federation because these are the regions that are mostly Russian speaking and and follow the Russian culture. Additionally, coming to this the topic of the debate, I guess why Russia attacked Ukraine, or what were the reasons of this invasion. For that, we have to go like probably a week or two before the invasion started. That is 24th of February. Russia was continuously pointing out the rumors of Ukraine joining NATO as a threat to its sovereignty. It was shown by Russia as clear as it could be that if Ukraine was to join NATO, then there will be quote unquote consequences. It will be a direct threat to its national security. And I guess this ignorance by I would particularly say this ignorance by the US administration into recognizing the seriousness of those threats and taking those threats as uh, some kind of a bluff, that played a huge role, because uh, even if we keep the national security of Russia aside, we are looking at a country where elections are due. The opposition leader of Alexei Navalny is about to die or has died. I'm not sure about the timelines. So a country knows that it will go politically very bad for that person, and that could lead to him, getting out of power. So he will have to do that muscle flexing in front of uh, his overall audience, quote unquote, to show them that no, the Russian Federation is not weak enough that a nation that has vowed neutrality will go into NATO and we won't be able to do anything. Yeah, Rose.
Thank you so much, Prince. Great insights right there. Next up will be Suri.
I just wanted to address that point, language being the factor for drawing border. I think that's true in general, and but that's just not only factor, and that's why, even when we are dividing borders, in India, let's say, we divide the borders. In some states, there are people who do speak a different language. There would be some villages or part of the district that speak a different village that would be surrounding a different one, but still they are divided based on some geographical or administrative or other constraints. And that could be language or culture as well. Like language is one of the factors in culture that is not sufficient. So like and so there is some familiarity and not like complete familiarity between Russia and Crimea, and also familiarity differs. Ukraine, all of Ukraine at some point was part of USSR. So in general, Russian Federation, like folks in the Russian Federation, are very very familiar with the Ukrainian culture because it is not significantly different from the Russian culture itself. Anyways, so it, what I intend to say is I think language does play a factor. I think what Prince was trying to point out, and I do agree it's not sufficient, but it's not sufficient to say that okay, people speak language, so this area or wherever they live should definitely be merged. It's an important criteria, but it's not sufficient criteria.
Thank you, Suri. I'll let Venkat go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the West and earlier Europe, Western Europe, and now the US has consistently made some mistakes about Russia. They have looked at points in time when Russia was down, was very weak and unable to make an impact in international affairs, and they assumed that that state of affairs would continue. They failed to realize that Russia has fundamentally the ingredients of a powerful nation, a strong power, one of the great powers, and that Russian power will come back eventually, even if they are down at a particular point in time. So I'll explain what I mean by that. In the First World War, Russia was defeated by Germany. That was Imperial Russia, the Tsar's government. And then when Germany also was defeated, France and Britain, and to a lesser extent the US, kind of implicitly assumed that Russia would be down forever, and they used that particular point in time, Russian weakness and German weakness, to put together a Treaty of Versailles, and they revised the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which was put together between Germany and Russia. They ate further into Russian territory. Um, and they imposed the Versailles Treaty and associated treaties on Germany and Russia without inviting them to the table. Right? So the Germans felt humiliated, the Russians felt humiliated. And what the allies, the Western allies, failed to realize was that it's a temporary state of affairs. The weakness of Germany and Russia was a temporary state of affairs, and they will come back. And both of them did come back. Germany under Hitler and the Soviet Union, Russia under Stalin. And that was one occasion. The other occasion was when Hitler attacked the Soviet Union. And 6 weeks into the war, when they had massive successes, he announced that the enemy in the East has been struck down and will never rise again. We know how quickly Russian power came back at that particular point in time, right? So Hitler was defeated. And from 1945 until 1989, Russia was a superpower. And around 1989, basically the problems of the communist system caught up with them, and Gorbachev came along, and the Berlin Wall fell, and the Soviet Union itself collapsed. And once again, there was a period of time when Russia was too weak to make any impact on international affairs. And the US this time assumed that they made the same mistake as Hitler and the Western allies earlier. And they assumed that Russian power would be down forever, that Russia would never come back. And they used that as an opportunity to expand NATO eastwards. So, which is a paradoxical thing, right? If Russia is never going to come back as a powerful nation, you don't need NATO. Whereas if Russia was going to come back, uh, then it is unwise to expand NATO to the east as far as Clinton and later Bush did, because Russia is not going to like it. In fact, Boris Yeltsin kept making noises. Boris Yeltsin was Russia's president at the time of Russian weakness, and he kept saying, "We don't like this new settlement. We don't like the expansion of NATO to the east." And later on, after Yeltsin, Putin came along, and Putin actually tried to get into NATO himself, right? He thought that Russia would, if Russia applied to become a member of NATO, that they would be just automatically in the front of the line. And he was told that no, Russia has to go to the back of the line, like everyone else. And he felt humiliated because of that. And under Putin, Russian power came back, right? So once again, for the third time, the West made this mistake that Russian power will not come back. And so, to some extent, this is, this course of events was predictable, was highly predictable, and moving NATO further and further to the east was not a very intelligent thing to do. Perhaps if George H.W. Bush, that is the father of George W. Bush, had been around or had been in power, he wouldn't have made this mistake, because the Soviet Union collapsed when he was president, and he very strictly warned his aides and everyone, all authorities in the US, not to gloat over the fall of the Soviet Union. Right? He said, "Don't present this as a victory of the West over Russia. This is, an internal matter of the Russians. We'll just continue to present this as an internal matter of the Russians. They are reorganizing their society along different lines." And so, we will be supportive, but, we will not gloat. Unfortunately, Clinton and Bush and every other president after that did present 1980, the events of 1989, 1991 as a victory of the West over the Soviet Union. And that all of that has contributed to the feeling of rage and helplessness of Russia as a nation. Because at the end of the day, Russian power will come back. No matter how many times it goes down, it will come back. And when it comes back, it is going to start trying to revise the settlements that it doesn't like. And that is basically what is happening, I believe, that Russia does not like the settlements that have been more or less imposed on it from 1991 onwards. And it is trying to revise that settlement. And Russia has done that more than once in the past, and Russia is doing it, one more time. So the West does bear a big share of responsibility for the tragedy that is unfolding right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venkat. Thank you for providing such great context. Next up will be Suri.
Thank you, Venkat. I was just about to mention the same thing, Russia. So there was a Warsaw Pact that kind of included like significant part of the Eastern Europe and East Germany and Russia, and that was like the contender of NATO. And like as USSR fall, that organization itself fall, and that's where Venkat was mentioning uh, uh, the the president advised not to gloat about it. And after that, around 2000, as he rightly mentioned, they wanted to join NATO and they humiliated them. And about fall of power. So like some of the countries or the regions are naturally blessed with the resources or something that once in a while they might be down, but eventually they'll come back. That includes countries like India, China, Russia, and even some of the southeastern countries like Brazil and all. Eventually, and some of the African countries, they are in a region which are naturally fertile. They have like uh, good natural connectivity, and they're rich with the resources. These countries will eventually come back. And right now, world being unipolar, specifically West, is a little bit more kind of high on its horses, assuming that things would not happen. Like India itself was like probably out of 10 in terms of GDP, considering the population and all of that. Same thing was with China. In fact, China was behind a much smaller country like South Korea at one point of time, right? But now those countries are emerging and they're coming very, very fast. So this will lead to some of the instability in the global forum that probably West is not so much willing to recognize, and the treaty and the ideologies that they have formed would be one front, and that's why there is a discussion of second front coming up. At one point of time it was Russia, now it is China. It might be tripolar or multipolar world soon, where India might come up, Russia, and something probably in African side might come up. Like right now, like the Western world is leading specifically in terms of innovation and finance and all of that. But as the other countries do catch up, that makes it for a very interesting dynamic. That if whoever is leading is not willing to recognize, it's basically a dog fight at one point of time, right? If dog is weak and you just keep beating it up, well, you are ahead at that point of time. But when that dog is fed up, or he has had enough food and he has gained its strength, it's going to come back for its share. And if you're not willing to share, there is going to be a fight. Basically, that's what is happening in this case. And probably based on the way we are going, and there is like less recognition in some area, there are others on the verge of it, specifically China versus Taiwan. Like in some ways, there are like multifaceted interests, and the not recognition of Chinese power would be challenging. Like, let's say if you push it to 2050, by the time China might be the biggest GDP in the world. They would be the country with the biggest GDP in the world and probably the biggest army and probably one of the best resources. Then would the US alone would be able to defend it? Of course, they can rely on rest of the Western world to be able to assist them, but till when and how far, and not recognizing in somewhere like moving towards the unified accepted direction is challenging. By that I do not mean that China has a right on Taiwan or something like that, but that aggression in terms of you do this, I'll do that, and non-collaborative nature of the diplomacy has made it very challenging. I really loved the point that Venkat raised. I was just amending to that. Thank you, Venkat.
Thank you, Suri. Sorry, Prince can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. Yeah, I'll start by saying great points, both Venkat and Suri. Yeah, Venkat really put forth a great point that what happened in Treaty of Versailles, where a treaty was forced on the nation without even inviting them to the negotiating table. Now, okay, what's happened in the past has happened, but we need to see what we have learned through that experience. Have we really learned anything? In June 2024 itself, we saw Ukraine Peace Summit taking place in Bergenstock, where the same kind of regime was followed, and all the countries of the nation, all the countries of the world were invited except the nation of Russia. How are you going to make establish peace without inviting the other party involved in the war? It is not the case of what happened after World War One, where Russia and Germany were defeated and down to their knees, and you could just make up any rules and just enforce them at will. I guess Western leadership is still living in 1995, and they are not able to recognize the current multilateral world. Uh, they are still living in that unilateral euphoric dream that USA is the sole superpower of the nation. They could enforce anything by will through sanctions or directly waging war at nations who have nothing to do with those Europeans. And not even in the eastern hemisphere of the world, eastern and southern hemisphere of the world. Even the northern hemisphere nations like Germany and France do hate this kind of behavior. We saw how Germany was not willing to take part into this Western narrative that was demonizing Russia and just trying to make sure that they are established as demons, and it was just everything happened on the night of 24th February 2022, and nothing was going on like 2 or 3 weeks before that. And the same Europeans are also responsible to the eventual failing of the Turkish peace talks that was going so well, and people were assuming that the war would end in like 3 to 4 months because of those peace talks. And the current points they are putting forward, or the demands they're putting forth, are truly absurd, because they are saying to go back to the pre 2014 boundaries and even vacate the regions of Crimea. I mean, Crimea is the house of the Russian Black Sea fleet. Sorry, do we really think Russia is going to go back? And if we go by the democratic measures, then the annexation of Crimea was probably the most peaceful and non-violent annexation we have seen in the whole of the world. The Russian military directly walked into Crimea. There was no resistance, even from the local administration or people. A plebiscite was held during that time only, and the majority of the people voted to stay with Russia. Hence the quote unquote annexation. And I guess it is really an oxymoron when Western nations talk about democracy, because we see the hypocrisy that was shown in the recent 5 years of the history, where a same kind of military dictatorship was established over Myanmar, Bangladesh, and what is currently going on in Pakistan. A complete shift of policies comes into this narrative of oh, democracy is the best form of governance, when it's toppled by someone who you think would favor you in the greater game. We saw those actions in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and when a pro-Chinese dictator takes over a country like Myanmar, then sanctions are squashed against them. Even neutral countries like India are forced to take actions and cut down trade ties with a really important neighbor, I'd say. So, yeah, Western countries speaking on democracy is like chicken speaking for KFC. Yeah, Rose.
Thank you so much, Prince. Great points right there. Samarth, please go ahead.
At several points, this particular line of argument, it has been made that how this invasion was launched by Putin just to, shore up his establishment. I think we must take a broader look than that one. Although the particular events surrounding this war, it might be dictated by Putin to shore up his establishment. We must look at it from the point that, like any autocrat, like if he's going to consolidate his regime in this country, he cannot do so against the will of the majority of the people. So, so this invasion of Ukraine, it must be seen from the perspective of uh, Putin. He's securing his country and from the external threats, and thereby he is representing the will of the Russian people who whose top priority is uh, the security of their nation. I think we must look at it from this broader perspective of how even autocrats, like, they can uh, be in power only if over a long period of time they represent the will of the people. So, like, even if it was not for Putin, if some other person was in power, or some other establishment altogether was in power in present day Russia, it would have been like imperative that they take up the as their top priority the national security interests of Russia, and that would mean in this particular case actually launching an invasion when all other options have failed. So yeah, that is the point I wanted to make.
Thank you so much, Samant. Is there anybody who wants to speak next?
Overall, there is an agreement. Seems like, I think it was not unilateral reason for like uh, the
There is
Western
a
meddling,
lot
but it
of
was definite.
noise in your background.
Sorry.
There's a lot of noise in your background, so it's kind of hard to hear a few words that you're speaking.
Oh, is it any better right now?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I was saying it seems like there is a agreement overall, the Western influence was not the sole reason, but it was definitely one of the major providers. And I think I really like what somewhat added towards the end. Uh, it's definitely dependent on people, and just to bolster that point, even like monarchs, when they start going really against the country, there are revolutions that happen, and there is an example of it all over the world where monarchy has been thrown out of the picture, and somebody new establishes when it is completely against the will of the people. So I think most people would be agreeing, some people wouldn't care, and there would be some people who would against it. I really like that point. Thank you. I think there is not a lot of point against this topic, the Western meddling has not been the cause of this thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Suri. Like Suri said, I think most people here, if not all, agree that although NATO's actions or the actions of the West are not the sole reason for this conflict or the invasion, but definitely they play a major role in what is going on. Um, I think we can move towards our closing statements. If anybody has any other inputs to make before that, please go ahead. If not, start with the closing statements. Okay, I see Venkat raising his hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is not specifically about the relationship between Russia and US, but I think that the US and the West in general struggles to work effectively with countries that are not democracies. And there are some reasons for that. When you look at a democracy like India, the US, or Britain, or any of the democracies, it is possible for outsiders to get a fairly decent sense of, fairly accurate sense of the currents of thought and even the policy of the government, because the policies are announced in Parliament, Congress, as the case may be, and there are open newspapers that you can read. You can travel to those countries freely, talk to people, even talk to powerful people. For instance, visitors who come to India, I mean, like foreign diplomats who come to India, talk to both the ruling party and the opposition in India. The same applies to the US. So you get a good sense of where the country is headed and what the country is likely to do, in case of any eventuality. That is not the case with dictatorships. it is very difficult to understand Chinese thinking, the thinking at the highest levels of the Chinese government, because they're completely opaque. The same applies to Russia. In Russia, the government structure is even less institutionalized than in China. At least China, it's a Communist Party government. There is a presumably a well-defined mechanism for transfer of power. None of those things exist in Russia. No one truly knows what will happen to Russia after Putin, right? Who the next person will be, what the structures of government will be. And that is from a diplomatic international relationship standpoint, that's a failure to understand these countries better. So it becomes like a game of poker, right? You can see only the expressionless face of the player sitting across from you. You don't know what cards they're holding. You don't know what they're thinking. You have no idea whatsoever. And so you're reduced to very basic levels of risk taking, right? You try something and then you see how they respond. So it just becomes a very high stakes game of risk management. And one of the urgent tasks before the West and the US in particular is to set up some channels of communication with these opaque countries and try to understand what they are thinking and what they are likely to do under various circumstances. And that's really an effort in diplomacy. They need to stop. As someone said, they need to get off their high horse and stop saying that we won't talk to Putin or we won't talk to Xi. They need to establish diplomatic channels of communication with these countries, which will stay up and running no matter what, right? And there is precedent for that. During the days of the Cold War, they set up a hotline between Washington and Moscow so that if anything happens as a result of a misunderstanding, they can quickly sort it out. They need to resume something like that in the case of these powerful countries that can do a lot of damage, specifically Russia and China. And saying that we won't talk to them is childish. It's absurd, and it causes a lot of damage in this world. Thanks.
Thank you, Venkat. Is there anybody else who would like to speak next? I see Samaj. Please go ahead.
No, I think Venkat made an interesting point earlier about how when the Russian power was down in the years immediately after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Western powers, they took undue, some would contend undue advantage of that situation and made the most of it. They altered the status quo that was there, and they altered it in their favor by expanding NATO to the east. This is something that is like clearly observable, how during the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world was still bipolar, and during that time, the actions of US and NATO, they had to follow that logic. So during that time, there was this clearly demarcated sphere of influence, and all of the foreign affairs of any bloc, Western bloc or Eastern bloc, it was towards maintaining that stability and respecting that sphere of influence. But however, uh, as it was earlier pointed out, that situation changed rapidly after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the world became unipolar, with the US as that unipolar power. So it it, uh, it made the most of this newfound power by extending the NATO boundaries eastwards towards Russia. So, and one interesting thing about this development is the countries which acceded into NATO at this point of time, let's say like Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic, uh, they were like very pro joining the NATO at this point uh, because they had a history of like Soviet Union interference in their domestic affairs. Uh, so they thought it would be a good time to join NATO, and in the future of event of the eventual Russian accession, the playing field would be so altered that they wouldn't have to face the same dangers as they did earlier during the times of the Soviet Union. So it is like each actor, whether they are like small or big in the field, they are trying to make the most of the situation that they are in. And and at this particular point of time, which I'm referring to, this 1995 to 2000 time period, it was like that meant, each player meaning to make the most of what they had. That meant Poland and Hungary and all of these other smaller countries, they taking refuge under this broader NATO leadership, so that their future interests would be secured. So I just find interesting about how the actors, they try to secure their future interests, but then they do some miscalculations, and we eventually end up in this kind of a broader war. So it seems kind of inevitable that this war would have taken place, because it is kind of hard to expect the smaller countries like the Baltic states, Lithuania, and all of those countries. It's hard for them to expect not to take advantage of the of the situation where Russia was temporarily down and make the most of that one. The more I look into this conflict, it seems as though it was inevitable or somehow intractable. Yeah, so that is one observation that I wanted to make.
Great point, Summer. Thank you so much. Ashwin, please go ahead.
Yeah, now that the war has been waged, I would like to know what US and Russia are actually getting right now, because this war has been going on for many years. And if Russia wanted to really capture hold of Ukraine, I know they want to capture, but they have just deployed a small portion of their army and air force. I mean, if they really wanted to capture Ukraine, they would have poured in large numbers to overwhelm the Ukrainian defenses, and their losses would be minimized. The same goes for United States as well. If they really wanted to flush out Russia from Ukraine, they would have poured in more aid actually, and flushed out Russian troops from Ukraine. So what is happening right now? Basically, I mean, both sides are pouring in minimal amount of resources, and they're somehow balancing out each other and not really acting as aggressors. What's really happening? I want to know the situation.
Thank you for posing the question, Ashwin. But I think we have all come to a common ground on the actual topic of the debate. So I think if we can start with our closing statements and then take these questions and other discussions into the unmoderated session, that would be appreciated. So if anybody wants to start making the closing statements, please raise your hand. Yes, please.
I think some of the last statements we made were with the intent of closing statement, like with an alignment that, yeah, like Western influence was definitely one of the major causes of invasion into the Ukraine. I agree with that. I think that's a concluding statement from my side. I think similar thing we others also did, but I see few hands, so they might want to do it for themselves.
Yeah, of course, Surya, I could see that. But then the questions kept coming in. So yeah, that's why I actually had to ask for it again. So I see Prince and Venkat. Prince, you can go ahead, and then
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I would just like to say that I guess everybody agrees that it is a day of globalization and we live in a global world. So of course, if anything of such an extent will happen, then third party meddling would be there in any sort of conflict. But I guess when the third parties are meddling, then they should they should strive for the total stop of the war rather than encouraging one party that okay, you go ahead and we are there to support you. So
Thank you. Venkat, please go ahead.
So, apart from the factors that have been considered already for this war, there could be internal domestic compulsions that force Putin into this action of actually attacking Ukraine. For a very long time, he did make diplomatic representations and protests about the expansion of NATO. Now, we don't know what is the nature of the internal competition, power struggle and competition within Russia. It is entirely possible that there are entities within Russia that over time had started to portray Putin as a weak leader who is unable to do anything to protect Russia's interests, anything concrete to protect Russia's interests. And that may have forced him into this aggression simply in order to strengthen his own image within the country. So this is where the lack of knowledge of the country, its internal power dynamics really hurts, right? No one knows what is actually going on inside. Apparently, his inner circle has become smaller and tighter over time. There's some evidence for that, which means that some of the potential competitors may be getting sidelined, things like that. But perhaps there is competition even within that inner circle. What all this means is that it becomes a matter of urgency to have diplomatic contacts with Russia to get some level of understanding of the internal power dynamics within, so that some of these things don't happen in the future, because this could very well be a pattern that tends to repeat over time. The best way to avoid that is to have diplomatic contacts within the country. And I think that to me is one of the biggest learnings from this tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. I guess we'll be now moving into the unmoderated session, which will be a discussion session. So in this session, the participants don't need to raise their hands, but please make sure you guys speak one after another and do not cut each other off, and please be respectful. I believe Ashwin had raised a question earlier. You can go ahead now, Ashwin.
Yeah, the question was if Russia and United States or the West or whatever wanted to really achieve their objective, Russia could have poured overwhelming amount of force, that is, use their large air force and army to overwhelm Ukraine and capture the whole of Ukraine, but they didn't do that. The same for the West. If West wanted to flush out Russian forces from Ukraine, they could have given maybe 5 times the amount of aid, and they could have flushed out Russian forces. So why haven't they done that? I mean, what are the secondary objectives of Russia and America? Is it to sell more weapons? Is it to test their weapons? Or what is it? I mean, I'm looking for answers.
I think at least
Ashwin.
from Russian point of view, I think they are employing enough force, or they are increasing the force over time based on necessity. Earlier, I don't think so. They would have had expectation. Again, this is none of what I'm saying is backed by data. This is more of a best subjective opinion come speculation. So please treat it as such. And at least for the Western world, they are not direct participants, and I don't think so they would want to, because if they do get directly involved, then the uh, discussion escalates. Whatever nuclear power has been holding off, nuclear power, I have the nuclear weapons, you have the nuclear weapons, let's not attack each other, else it could get ugly. I think that specifically called out or uncalled out statement would no longer stand true, because if you get as heavily involved and you back up uh, like somebody like Russia in a corner and they have nowhere to go, they might end up deploying nuclear weapons. And I think US is skeptical of that, to not go in that direction. Plus, I think it's very, very beneficial for them to be a party with Ukraine, as they are selling a lot of arms, like donating some and then selling a bunch of them to Ukraine and uh, other countries directly and indirectly. So I think US is definite benefactor in that, and they are coming with different interests. Again, I think somebody might have a better data on this, so go for it.
Right. I've heard like similar questions asked, and those answered like, what were the actual intentions of Putin when he invaded Ukraine in February of 2022? Because at that time, the Russian army that invaded Ukraine, it numbered around 2 lakh, and to occupy, or to annex a country as large as Ukraine, that was insufficient. That one, like everybody agrees. And so the intention of Putin going into this invasion, it was more like regime change than the annexation of Ukraine. So if you look at the initial months of that invasion, the Russian army, they attacked Ukraine from various sides, but all of those, the various Russian detachments, they were heading towards the capital city of Kiev, and with the intention of, regime change, and overthrowing the hostile regime and propping up a regime that was favorable to Russian interests. But that attempt, it was beaten back by the Ukraine military, and then it became like increasingly clear that Russia could not achieve its main objectives. And then the war, which was initially planned to happen just for a couple of months, that became more like a long duration war, and that became like a more like a static war, where the battlefields, where the front lines did not change that much, and there was heavy casualties on both of the sides. So that happened. So there was definitely a miscalculation on the part of the uh, uh, Russian, defense establishment, where they underestimated Ukraine military's ability to defend its country. So yes, that is what happened, I think. So their intention was regime change, the main intention. But when that failed, this secondary objective of, if we cannot like achieve our primary war goals, it will be like we're gonna like annex as much as Ukraine as possible. So that became their their secondary objective.
I'm not particularly sure about it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That there was no as such pushback of the Russian military from Kiev as such, because from what I understood, it was some sort of a deal that was brokered in Turkey, that Russia would kind of take back its military from the northern front line, and in phases the war would end, and then there would be peace at the Black Sea region, and uh, then at the Donbas area as well. So I don't think there was as such a pushback by the Ukrainian military, because their air defenses were overwhelmed. The Russian jets were raiding Kiev like anything, and the Ukrainians were virtually able to do nothing. So I guess there was some sort of a deal that was broken in Turkish areas.
I wanted to pose a question actually. Like, so this is underlying assumption that I have, at least some of us stated out, and others might not have it. Is I think the underestimation of Russia. So Russia, as like it is emerging as a superpower, it definitely wants to exert its influence and get to its neutral state based on its current status or economy or whatever is relevant. I think similar things could be said or applied to other emerging countries like probably India and China. So, do you guys see some sort of similar warfare emerging? I think some of that already did probably in 1962 and 1971, specifically for India, Pakistan, and India, China. But as countries are emerging and we are also going into the superpower, Do you think something similar could happen where, like, India or China might try to exert their influence, might try to create bases all around the world? Or there is also the possibility that, like, West would try to meddle and, like, probably have a ongoing war front between India and China, so that, like, they still are spearheaded and, like, India and China fight with it. And I think that poses its own challenges in terms of the global economy that we have. So it's a two-part question. I'd love to understand what you guys think.
I mean, does India not already have foreign bases in Tajikistan? And Tajikistan is like handled both by India and Russia, but we have our individual independent bases in Mauritius and Seychelles and in some regions of Maldives that are currently not known to the public, but there is a great talk within the defense sphere that India already has secured some sort of a military base in one of the islands of Maldives. And speaking of China, Djibouti is one of uh, the foreign bases that they do advertise, but we know what's happening in Hambantota and Gwadar as regions because, yeah, and when we talk of a war, then yeah, I think uh, a war with China and Taiwan is kind of inevitable. We are just trying to delay the timelines. Yes.
Right. I think you did answer part of the question. The other part was between, like, West meddling and, like, creating a war between India and China themselves. Like, there are some frictions or some sparks flying here and there, but that has happened with other countries at different points as well. Sometimes it takes fire, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just sparks, right? That is something also I'm curious about what we are thinking. And also, like, well, India and China has established some bases based on their current status. But if you're looking at another 30 years or so, like, at least China would be a similar superpower as Europe, at least in terms of global GDP. And India would literally be the third one up there, right? So it would be probably heading more towards tripolar world. In that case, it's just not sufficient to have a few bases here and there. Like, for example, US is in northwestern hemisphere, but they have bases in all the major areas, including, I think they have some bases off of Maldives as well. Maldives or which country? I don't remember exactly, but they have it, like, literally all over the world. Like, significant of them in the west northern, west southern, eastern southern, and eastern northern hemisphere as well. I think no point in the earth is, like, more than like 3,000, 4,000 kilometers away from one of the bases that US possesses. They have created an aura like that, like, and I think to be able to defend in the world as dynamic as this, distance and time is gets very, very crucial. That has some interesting implication. Any thoughts on that?
India, its foreign policy doctrine, I think it is quite clear that we do not want to, align ourselves with any major superpower, whether it be with US or Russia. And I think that is a wise decision because the priorities of these superpowers, it is different from India's priorities. India's priority is like achieving long-term stability and prosperity, whereas what US wants, I think, is for India to act as a counterweight to China. So that means USA would in fact be happy if the situation between India and China, all of the tensions, it actually escalated. It would be bad in that case for China and India, but good for US. So India would do well to pursue its independent foreign policy doctrine and not like align itself with whether USA or Russia, because Russia is like now I think the staunch ally of our arch enemy China. So neither of these countries, well, all countries have their own best interest in mind, and India should is likewise. And for India to pursue its best interests, it would mean like just staying the course of the present non-alignment.
Yeah, and just to add to what Sumit said, I guess it also comes with kind of an aspiration that India possesses, that we also want to be one of those great powers that has an influence at the global stage. Yeah, I guess that's why we don't try to associate ourselves with uh, any great power, and we project ourselves as the leader of the global south.
Hey guys, this was lovely. I think this was one of the shorter debate. Really appreciate it. I'll have to jump. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.
See you, Suri.
Yeah, one question I'd like to have is like, okay, we have discussed what was the uh, importance of European powers meddling into this Russia-Ukraine conflict, but what is the role of Mr. Zelensky in all of this? Because um, we have seen a different form of Ukraine as opposed to the smaller brother or the submissive nation that is unfortunate to have, let's say, a weird boundary with Russia. So, what has Mr. Zelensky to do in this conflict? Is he playing a positive role or a negative one?
I do not know enough about the personal background of Zelensky to answer this question, Prince. But I think uh, what Ukraine was intending to do was just follow the path of the uh, you know take the lead of the countries before them, like how Poland and Hungary, for example, they secured their position by entering NATO. So what they did, as I was said earlier, was at a time when Russia was down, so they entered into this broader security arrangement, so that in the case of this eventual Russian ascension to power, you know, their interests would be taken care of, and it would not be threatened by Russia. So, one by one, the countries which were formerly in the sphere of influence of Soviet Union, they joined NATO and kind of secured their future interests. And now, when Ukraine it tried to do the same, this was crossing the. It was like red lines. Already, the joining of Poland and Hungary, it was considered as crossing a red line by Russia, and now it was like. Uh, Ukraine joining NATO, it was crossing the brightest of the red lines. So this is what I find interesting about this conflict is like each country it try to do the best out of its situation, and this war it arised out of that pursuit, I believe. So in some sense I find this war kind of inevitable because this was due to some problems which I the more I study about it, it seems like intractable. Like how can you not expect each country to just pursue its own long-term security interests? Yeah, so that was the point that I wanted to.
I mean, as far as the role of Zelensky goes, I believe it depends on what perspective you're looking at him from, right? Because if you're somebody who is of the opinion that Russia is the aggressor and it is not just about Russia defending itself, but more about it violating Ukraine and its autonomy. I think in that sense, so many people, when the war was like in its prime, so many people celebrated Zelensky as a nationalist, as a patriot. But at the same time, if I'm not wrong, I think when he was when he came into power, I think it was due to the fact that he agreed that Ukraine would have a neutral stance, and then later he goes on and decides to join NATO. So I don't know where that leads him. It really depends on what perspective you're looking at him from. Like, it really depends on that, what role he's playing. And I think it is also interesting that he has rejected direct talks with Russia, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, at the best of my knowledge.
I think it's funny how, although all of the most of the participants in this debate, they are in like broad agreement about how the West is surely at fault, for this conflict to take place. If you look at the mainstream media, like whether it is Indian or foreign, I think it would be uh, it doesn't capture our viewpoints more. There, the I think the prevailing viewpoint is that every country has the right to self-determination, including Ukraine, and Russia, by violating the Ukrainian right to self-determination, it's being the aggressor. So that's the prevailing viewpoint uh, in the mainstream narrative, unlike what the viewpoints of the debaters in this group is.
Hi, this is Sarbendu. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible, Sarbendu.
Yeah. So yeah, I was hearing you guys out. So I think I posted one video yesterday that is about Afghanistan great game when this proxy war started. Correct. Now the thing is, uh, 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 I don't know if you had chance to see that video, but that actually fundamentally changed the world in 1990, which you guys mentioned, from a bipolar world to a unipolar world, because the Soviet Union actually lost. We don't say lost, but retreated, had heavy casualties and all, and it didn't had any allies at the point of time. Even China was not with Soviet Union because there was this great Sino-Soviet split from 1970 to 1980. You can look up that at the point of history. Before that, China and Soviet Union had worked together actually. So the thing is that it had no support. It had some support from India at that point of time, and India was kind of under Congress, Gandhi's, but it didn't have support from much of the world, and it was fighting a proxy war. There were the Mujahideens, who were basically Muslim mercenaries who were, I would say, Muslim Sunni mercenaries, if I have to be very specific, brought all over the world by CIA and armed to the teeth. Pakistan was used as the training ground. So global, I mean, where did global terrorism arise? I mean, many people ask that question. I have my favorite answer that global terrorism arose from this training of the Mujahideens by CIA at that point of time. And there is a book also, which I'll mention in our common WhatsApp group. But what happened was, when you fight a proxy war for a long time and you don't have a lot of global allies, and the other side had global allies, and they don't fight a proxy war, so they don't lose men. They just have to pump in money, and dollar being the de facto world currency since at least 1970 or 1945, we may say 1970 at the petrodollar. So you can print as much currency as possible without getting devalued, unlike others. So your currency really don't follow the rules of macroeconomics, and you can fund a war, which Russia couldn't. And Russia had to, I mean, Soviet Union had to retreat. But it was a proxy war, you have to understand. Now, if you look at Ukraine, coming back to Ukraine, which is happening again after another 35 years, rather, I think February 24th, 2022, the war started. So which is 1990, so 32 years. 32 years is not a long time in history, but it's a long time as far as people remember, past events and correlate it to present. So why this happened, I think it was very well captured in the document which had been uploaded by someone after that war, US had, in spite of assurances by James Baker to Gorbachev, not that Gorbachev was a very, was in a very authoritative position after losing that war, although he became a darling of the Western press because he was not authoritative, he became a darling. We can look at that way. Now, NATO shouldn't, push to the east, and that was clearly violated, not once but several times. We can say that these countries wanted to join NATO for security reasons and other things. We can say, that NATO, I mean, even if they wanted to join, NATO had given a word to Soviet Union, which was a predecessor state, of Russia. So what happens when a state, breaks up into 15 parts, and they are not big parts? Russia is still a huge country with spanning over 11 time zones and having, I think, the largest resources in the world. US also has huge amount of resources, and resources means natural resources. So 15 parts. So what happens to international treaties? Do treaties stay in place? Word of mouth stay in place, or do they fall just like that? We have seen in India, what happens. So of course it became basically, a tissue paper, if I may use that word, that word which Secretary of State, James Baker gave to Gorbachev, and Gorbachev was not that authoritative, as we know, and he was soon to be expelled, in a coup where President Yeltsin of Russia, the President of Belarus, and President of Ukraine, met one fine morning, one fine evening rather, in a resort or in a forest at the border of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, and thought that, okay, let's dissolve Soviet Union. And Soviet Union was dissolved. So there was 1993. I still remember the dates, and there's a lecture on that, so which I'll forward. So Soviet Union immediately was not dismantled, but it was dismantled to get rid of Gorbachev. Now, all these things Mr. Putin had actually noticed, because Putin was part of the same Communist Party, and he was a part of KGB. Okay, he was working for KGB, and he has seen all this, turmoil that Russia had gone through from 1990 to 1999, rather, when Boris Yeltsin succeeded. Now, the thing is that we have to look things from that point of view, rather from self-determination point of view. Because what if Russia and China now say, okay, you to Mexico, you join BRICS, and BRICS is, mind you, not a military union like NATO, and we are going to place so many nuclear missiles targeting the cities of USA. Okay, and between Russia and China, they have enough nuclear missiles. I think more than US. Even Russia has more than US. So, and we will target these cities. You join BRICS, and we will have a lot of, good trade agreements between ourselves. And why not? Because they produce most of the merchandise. Today, China produces most of the merchandise, not USA. So US has become from a productive economy to a services-based economy, except for, some advantages in the IC and the solid state devices and this 3-nanometer chip and all. In many technology areas, US has lost its technology edge, because they have ignored engineering and they have ignored science for a long time, a large part of population. Whereas it's just the opposite with China. But US retains the power of the dollar, which is the de facto currency of the world. It can print currency. Right? So on one hand, we have goods, on one hand, we have currency. So this is how the world is looking like right now. So now, if they want to set up a nuclear base in Mexico, enrolling Mexico in BRICS, or even if they don't want to set up a military base, they just enroll Mexico in BRICS, there'll be huge opposition in US. We are already seeing that as BRICS is expanding, US is actually having a lot of issues. Why don't we think in the same way as NATO, which is actually a military alliance, unlike BRICS? BRICS is an economic alliance. So the unipolar world order has given away. It's now a multipolar world. It's not we are going to a multipolar world. It's already a multipolar world. China and Russia being the other poles. We are fancying that India is a pole, but if you look at trade data, India's import-export data, so then you will understand that we import most of the things. We don't export much merchandise. And merchandise includes capital goods and machineries also, which are critical. So India is trying to be a pole. India is not a pole, is my humble opinion. But Russia and China already are poles. They have emerged as poles. Russia not through its economic might, but its military might. And by the way, Russia is also economically very strong. It's not the biggest in nominal terms, nominal GDP in Europe, but what matters is PPP GDP. So because in nominal GDP, inflation is not taken into account. In PPP GDP, if you have high inflation, that is also taken into account. How much goods you can actually afford. So in PPP GDP, you can just check it out. It's all there in Twitter. Russia is now bigger than Germany after recession has set in Germany. So this is the context in which we are discussing the Russia-Ukraine war, or rather Russia-US war, Russia-NATO war, Ukraine being just a mere proxy. Now, Mr. Putin had, in 2014, as you know, there's a regime change, right, in Ukraine, which has been put down in the document. And that regime change had been done during Mr. Obama's presidency. Not that many people in India immediately came to know about it. It's not so. And that was a pro-US regime, which actually, wanted to get into NATO. Before that, there was a period when Ukraine said, no, we will coexist with Russia. We won't become a dagger by Russia's side. We will just be a friendly neighbor, because Ukraine was a part of Soviet Union. And all the infrastructure development in Ukraine had been done in the last 70 years of existence of Soviet Union between 1918, that is when the Bolshevik Revolution took place, to 1919 or 1993, let's say, when the Soviet Union was dissolved, as I just described. So how many years is that? You can just count it, some 63 years that, that communist Soviet Union had existed. But all the infrastructure, the railway, the ports, the telecom infrastructure, of course, came a little later. The gas pipeline, everything, most of the things had been set up in that period, and it was going on also. So Ukraine that way was a sister state of the Soviet Union, the breakaway of the 15 states. Now, similarly, Mexico is not a sister state. It's the other way. The US is a sister state. If you go back to 1850s, you will see that large parts of Mexico were taken by US to become what has become USA. So 10 states, and of that, California, Texas, New Mexico, I'm just telling you the names. All these were part of Mexico. There are 10 states. You can just Google and find out. There are 10 states. Louisiana, I think. New Mexico is there. Yeah, Utah is there. And Arizona is there. All these things are coming, so I have to look up. But I already told you 5 states. There are another 5 states. So these were actually usurped from Mexico to make the United States. So it's not that United States was never an aggressor. It's completely a wrong notion. So that is why I think the study of history is a must in order to understand geopolitics and our present times, because history repeats, as I've said. And Mr. Putin and Russia had put these points actually in the argument. And these are the arguments that you can throw away, because these are the arguments which are already they are documented. One can't change history. It's documented that we can say that US is a sister state of Mexico, not the other way. So should Ukraine remain a buffer zone between an expanding NATO? Or should Ukraine become an outpost of NATO? Should Mexico become an outpost of BRICS? These are all loaded questions with no very easy answers. And the answers have to come from the ideologies we believe in, from the positions that we are coming in, and whether we are open to modify the positions that we have taken. Again, delving deep into history and what have happened. I mean, even the smallest things which have happened. So one of these lectures by a Soviet, there's a person who was a Soviet journalist, and I'm just forgetting his name. So he had given us lecture in USA only, I think in 2018, in I think MIT or Yale University, about the whole thing which happened after 1993. In fact, if you follow his lecture, and it was given to an American audience in a university where people could challenge the facts that we are placing. He was a reporter, and he had citizenship of both USA and Soviet Union, and France and Soviet Union, I think, like that. So he had worked with the he had worked in Moscow, he had worked in Washington, in USA, in New York or Washington, and he had worked in Paris. So he was fairly neutral, and he was saying that, and I'll upload that video, that Mr. Putin had wanted to, till 2008, actually Putin wanted to become a part of NATO, and NATO didn't accept Russia. Putin said, look, you take Russia, and then we provide a holistic security for Europe itself, and NATO didn't admit Russia, in spite of Mr. Putin's mistake. But instead, it actually went after the states that broke away from Russia. So it started enlisting Estonia, Latvia, then Ukraine came, Georgia. So then what do you do? I mean, so so one is basically, the tendency in Washington to say whoever doesn't listen to us, we call him a dictator, we call him an autocrat. Okay, and just because we hold elections, it's not that that USA is a very democratic state. There has been the allegation by US, Russia, and China that it's controlled by corporates. It's a corporate place. It's not a democracy. The kind of thing that we are also experiencing in India. So corporates actually, and these corporates they call Zionist or whatever, who are the owners of the corporate. So it's not that the promoter of Google, but who owns Google share, which is BlackRock, which is the huge asset management companies, which is State Street. So the owners of BlackRock, we are not looking at Google. So BlackRock is owning Google and BlackRock is owning Microsoft, two competitors. And BlackRock is owning Amazon. BlackRock is owning, Coke and Pepsi. We think Coke and Pepsi are competitors. No, they are not, because at the very top, they are being owned by BlackRock. And so these are the corporations who are controlling both the Republican and Democratic Party. And how can you say you are democratic? Just because you are holding elections and people are actually voting between no choices, really. And you are deciding that you want to take up more and more resources of the world. How? Because you have the money printing machine, which is the dollar. So you can't just go on printing money. You need resources against it. And you want to take resources in Ukraine. You want to take resources in the vast Russian hinterland, which is spread over 11 time zones, having 75 trillion of natural resources, is the largest. So all these are concerns of Russia. All these are concerns of China. And they are prepared for that. They are prepared. Okay. Now, these concerns haven't been expressed in India by both the parties, Congress and the BJP, leave alone the smaller regional parties. So on one hand, we have a kind of a mega corporatocracy, which is basically by the asset management companies, controlling all the US companies, especially the fabulous five, who have the largest market share of the 195 trillion market, 54 trillion market share that US has now, which is again 195% of the GDP, kind of a little ridiculous. But anyway, out of that, the asset management companies actually own. BlackRock itself has 10 trillion or more. I have to check the latest numbers. Now, these are the companies which are controlling US as per Russia and China. And that is not an invalid allegation. And they want resources. And when you want resources, you want war. And when you want war, you don't send your own people because there will be losses. So you settle for proxy wars. So the security of Europe, the autonomy of Ukraine, the security of Russia, the autonomy of states have to be looked in this fashion. In fact, what has happened in Bangladesh right now, many people think that the regime that has been put in, basically, after removing Sheikh Hasina, is basically backed by US. Because in Bangladesh also, in Bay of Bengal, US is wanting a military base in St. Martin's Island, off the coast of Chittagong in Bangladesh. Why they want the base? The answer is very simple, because Bangladesh's trade with China is growing. So they want to put that trade under, they want to block that trade. And the other thing is all the Chinese merchandise that actually passes through Gulf of Malacca, through Singapore and comes towards Middle East and Europe. So Gulf of Malacca is a choke point, but after that you come to Bay of Bengal. So it's very natural for US to ask for a, Singapore is anyway a US military base, to ask for a military base in Bay of Bengal. And US has 900 military bases, whereas China may have 3 and Russia may have 4, not many. So 900 military bases, $900 billion of spend on defense by US, which is basically more than the next 10 states. So after that, China comes and, India comes a little below after Russia or just before Russia, something like that. So next 10 states don't spend $900 billion. US spends next $900 billion because it has so many military bases. And what is the effect of that? The effect of that is a huge, huge deficit in US budget. People are looking at stock market, not at budget deficits. The budget deficit of US, because of this huge military spending, has grown now to $1.6 trillion. So you look at I'll paste all this information. Expenditure budget is roughly, I'm saying last year, 2023, 6.4 trillion dollar, and or 6.2 or 6.3 trillion dollar expenditure budget. Revenue budget is 4.6 trillion dollars. So it's 1.6 trillion. So 1.6 trillion every year you have to basically take loans to run the US government. And who provides these loans? Most of the loans have been provided by Japan and China. On the foreign buyers of US loan, which you call US treasuries, and by US domestic institutions and by Fed. So China is now the second largest. It was the largest. It has reduced its treasury. That is also causing anxiety in the US. So why are you needing so much of loans? You are needing so much of loans because you have so many military bases around the world. You want to be the chowkidar of the world, the policeman of the world. In an age of unipolar world, but the world has changed. So 900 military bases, you can check it. It's there. The data is there in Twitter. If you just search in Twitter, there will be a ton of data. Because thanks to Musk, the Russian and the Chinese have also been able to post their side of the story. Now, where is India in all this? Well, in India, we didn't have, I'm very happy that this discussion has been arranged, but in India, we didn't have any political debate, even in a regional, in a local elections and in a Lok Sabha and municipal, any election. So even the elite also, middle class also doesn't know much of the issues at hand. I mean, leave alone the history, the current issues. So we have to bring data and we have to analyze that what is happening because of the war. The superpower is in deficit, but it's still a superpower because dollar is still the reserve currency. It may change if BRICS tomorrow comes up with a new currency. And that's why this nervousness. And why does BRICS wants to come up with a new currency? Because of this huge loan that US has to take to run its budget. In an ideal scenario, a currency would depreciate. It will actually go to dust. And this is one of the reasons why you'll see that the central banks of global south, including China and India, even including India, have actually not increased their dollar assets so much, but have taken out gold, have gold now. They have bought huge amounts of gold in 2018. So all these things that I'm saying are actually dots on the same matrix. They are connected. The Ukraine war, largest number of military bases. You are running a budget whose deficit is growing every day, and you have to borrow money from the same adversaries. You are borrowing money from adversaries like China, because that's how China was actually funding the US deficit for all these years. It was buying goods, it was selling goods to US, it was getting dollars. What will you do with the dollars? It was buying US debt, treasuries. Now that debt is growing. So of course, China is not interested in keeping the treasuries, leave alone the problem on the military side, because your treasury value depreciates when deficit increase. Simple, finance 101. Yeah, so I think I have completed.
Yeah, can I
That
talk?
was, yeah, sure, Ashwin.
Yeah, I would like to basically say that the West is always more democratic than, I would say, the communists, and they have more freedom of speech, and they're more liberal, I would say. Liberal, not 100%, but relatively more liberal, I would say. So I believe Western influence is better than Russian influence, generally speaking. And Western influence on Ukraine in a certain way would be good, I would say. As I said, some people themselves choose to align themselves with the West. As Indians, I believe even our values align with the West, and we do not seek dictatorship, or at least majority of the people, Indians are not communists or socialists, I would say.
But are
This
we
is the point.
capitalists? Question is, are we capitalists?
Sorry,
Are we capitalists?
we are more towards opposite of socialism.
Okay. So here, let me jump in here quickly. So I have, while I went to study computer science, I also studied economics. So in economics, there are three kinds of goods: capital goods, consumer services, nothing else. And economics doesn't talk of ideology. Ideology comes from political science. Economics talks of budget. Economics talks of how you make the goods, how you take money from your central bank and convert it into goods and services. That's it. So capital goods is related to capitalism, as you can see, because like machines. So you can find out the amount of machines that we have been able to make, even after liberalization, not much. Ours is more of a services economy, always say. So we have to understand that the press, and I have a lot of friends in journalism, the press talks about communism and capitalism as if they're economic concepts. These are political science concepts. Economics doesn't talk of that. Economics talks of, as I said, that whether you are able to make capital goods, or consumer services. So most of the goods that we make, and actually most of the goods which you sell are consumer goods and consumer services. But in order to make those goods, you need capital goods in order to scale them up. And these capital goods we are importing. We used to import these capital goods, and so most of the global south after independence from the West traditionally, especially Europe, not US, I would say, some from US, mostly from Europe. Now that has changed. That has changed to first Japan, because Japan went ahead of Europe in terms of giving us better machines. You go to the garment sector in Bangalore or Coimbatore, you see the machines for yourself, not the clothes, and then you will get an idea. Korean machines, and now increasingly Chinese machines, because the Chinese machines have become equally good and cheaper. So of course, if you are setting up a garment unit, you will go for the cheaper and the go for packaging machines where all your so capitalism has to be seen in the context of capital goods. So if we are actually a capitalist nation, we should be making at least for ourselves capital goods, if not exporting. That's my submission. That we are not there. Why we are not there? There can be so many reasons and answers, but let's not go into that. So that is one. So if capitalism is a value system of the West, we are not there. We are still not there. But in China is a communist country, we are saying, politically, but it's a capitalist country in economic sense because it is able to make machines. So is Russia. So this is one thing that we have to be aware of. And of course, for making capital goods or capitalism, you need a huge investment in science and engineering, which is not there.
Yes, Arvind, I agree on that. I think Ashwin was making a point. I'm not sure. Can you reiterate that, Ashwin?
Related with both economy and the political structure, both of them. The West is more democratic, and we have freedom of speech and stuff like that. I mean, people have greater control compared to the Russia and China, where the people are not able to select their leaders. Like the leaders are selected not based on what choices the people make. That is one thing. And when it comes to the economy in the United States, like they're more towards right. I mean, if you have the concept of left right, right, in economy as well. they are more towards the right, more a liberal economy, like the rich can exploit the poor to a very good extent. And in countries like India, I mean, we take measures. I mean, there are more labor laws in place and stuff like that. And there is also something like subsidies and stuff like that. Also, of course, even in US, you have that. But if you put it in a single dimension, in capitalist economy, I mean, there are not much rules for the rich to exploit the poor. That's what I meant.
Europe has a huge socialistic structure. Europe has, Germany and France. They are actually the capital goods maker, capitalism, of course. And Germany and France has much more stringent labor laws than India and US. And both, they are the engines of EU. Both have liberal democracy. And of course, Germany is under US military this thing because military bases are there. France is that way. Actually, France, quote unquote, France and England are the only two, autonomous states, independent in because there is no US military base that way. And there's a history to that after how the things shaped up after the World War II, because the military bases were set up, NATO's all over Europe. But France had its own, basically, all being a part of it. So all I'm saying is that Germany and France economically, they are also to the middle of the road. They're not to the right or to the left, maybe, but they're definitely at the center, right bang at the center, or you can say left of center. I mean, till very recently when Angela Merkel went out. So under Angela Merkel, Germany had been quite to the left of the center, actually. Angela Merkel, if you look at her biography, she had actually 2 doctorates in physics and chemistry. Doctorates. So you can understand why Germany is. Now, she had led Germany very creditably. Germany had become a huge, actually the engine which moves EU in terms of innovation, science, production and all. As I said, that we still look at German machines. We still look at Bosch as a company or Siemens as a company, which makes huge capital goods. It's not visible in Bangalore, but I go to power plants and all are Siemens turbines. Now Chinese turbines are coming. So just to give this example, not about computers, but also in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, I mean, you have capital goods across the engineering. Now, Germany has a very left of the center approach where employees not only have good labor laws, they are also shareholders of the companies. So here, except for Infosys, we haven't created employee shareholder. And Infosys has created to a certain extent, but not to the whole extent, if I may say so.
But you can buy shares in the market, right? In the share market.
That is different. Then the share price has gone up. So it is before, when the company was actually formed, then the shares are actually much cheaper. So that is the kind of ownership that you give to the employees. So Huawei is basically 100%, 99% employee. You can check.
Ashram, do you have any kind of
data is there. I'll share. The only thing I'm saying is India has none of these. So India hasn't created share capital for employees, if you may say so. But we are saying we are capitalists. So we have to understand, I mean, what we mean by these are the discussions happening in Europe right now as we are discussing. I'm happy we are discussing here. These are discussions happening in US also. Because in US, many people are understanding it, though US has a much broader employee shareholder, in Google and Amazon and all these companies among the US employees. And China has done a company which is 99% employee shareholder owned, which is not, by the way, listed, not in the market, not listed. So it's not necessary the company has to be listed to create capitalism. No. So the profits are shared. So I'm saying that we have to really ask ourselves this question: what are these Western values that even the West hasn't been able to follow very religiously? Germany has followed quite a bit of that, but has US followed? So in US, 10% of people own 85% of the shares of this 54 trillion, and 90% have 15% share. Bottom 50% has no share. And bottom 50% has this Fed data I'll share, has $6,000 left in their banks. Just $6,000.
Yeah, I have put in the chat. Actually, the actual wealth distribution in US, they say 1% control 40% of the wealth in United States.
I'm also saying that 10%, let's say 10%. All Indians come in 10% because we have sent our best and brightest there.
Yeah, but I said for US, top 1%.
US only I'm saying.
Dr. Bindu, maybe we could let him speak 1 second, please.
Yeah, I mean, the wealth distribution in US and India are very unequal compared to that of Europe.
Europe. So that's what I'm saying. So what is the aim of capitalism? The way is it to kind of create, so you can create good wealth distribution by, having shareholding of productive assets with the employees, or you can concentrate wealth. And so what is, so that there is no one definition that we are agreeing on capitalism. What is that we'll call capitalism? Is it the ownership of capital goods?
Actually, I meant opposite of socialism. I mean, the left and right is, the extreme left is, I mean, all the resources are equally distributed. Extreme left, I'm telling. Extreme right is you have no control. The rich can exploit the poor how much ever they want. That in the economy, that is what I understand.
Correct. Now
if I make capitalism has virtually got nothing to do with economics. Capitalism is a political ideology that simply advocates that.
Exactly. I'm saying that. I'm also saying that. And that is also the current debate, basically. I'm saying there is no conclusion reached that capitalism is emerged out of political science, which is itself a branch of science. And we can read political, could have been students of political science, So one of my senior was, took up political science for his IS exam. So Kejriwal was my senior, by the way. Not he, but someone else. I'm saying economics is a separate science. So you have either enroll in Bangalore University for political science or for economics, and you will get capitalism and communism in political science. But in economics, it's about, how you make these capital goods, consumer services, how you take debt, you convert debt, which is debt capital, we say, and then you give equity capital. Equity capital can be held by the government as PSUs, or equity capital can be held by one promoter majorly, and very small amount is shared with the employees. Initially, and equity capital can be held by employees a lot, and promoters not so much. And then you create, you create these capital goods, consumer services. So these are the things that you create, and these are the things we need, correct, right now. So I will have food. Food is basically consumer goods, perishable consumer goods, because we will have lunch. But in order to prepare that food, you may have needed, a lot of capital goods in order to prepare it.
Sir Virgo, I'm so sorry to interrupt. You're making some great points, and we are gaining a lot of insights from what you're communicating to us. But at the same time, I think you're taking up a lot of time. So maybe if you could sum up your argument into more crisp sentences.
I'm actually done. So I'm saying that we should see the Ukraine war, Russia-Ukraine war, from all these aspects. That's what I made a concluding statement, and then I came back. I don't want to take up your time more. So this is what I'm saying, that this is a 360 view of the Russia-Ukraine war, and there is a war in Palestine and Israel going on, and one war may break out in the Bay of Bengal area, as I said, the Bangladesh thing, of which both our parties are keeping quiet. Why are they keeping? We are not asking our parties why you shouldn't speak up. We are not demanding, because we ourselves are not discussing. But here we are discussing right now with an open mind, of course. And you see my points, I see your points, we discuss. And it's very important to engage politically and ask these parties, not the smaller regional parties. I'm saying again, I come from Bengal. I am not saying you ask Trinamool or JDS here, but surely the two major political formations, BJP and the Congress, about these points.
Okay, Rose, if there is no, nobody has to talk, if nobody wants to talk about the war itself, I want to ask a question for Sarabindu regarding the economy itself.
I think we are going completely off topic, and we could make this into a different topic for the Wednesday session. How would you guys like that?
It's just one question I have. It's okay. We can finish here only. If nobody else wants to talk, somebody else wants?
Samar, Sandeep, any inputs?
I have one thing to add. Like how Ashwin asked earlier, isn't India naturally aligned with US and the West in general, because we share the same political and cultural values? So that one, I found the question interesting, and I want to answer that question. So I think it's not at all clear looking at the political culture of India, whom we most closely align with, whether it is with USA or Russia?
Historically, India was slightly aligned towards the Soviet Union, although India had officially declared that we were non-aligned. But if you see when during 1971 or 72, when Pakistan was split into two, that is Pakistan and Bangladesh, the Soviet Union supported India and USA supported Pakistan. After India started expanding, after the economic reforms, after the first Gulf War, then India started liberalizing its economy, and that is when things started to change. And we also started accepting US as an ally. I mean, India is sort of balanced, I would say, between Russia and USA, and also other countries like France, Germany, and stuff like that. India wants to maintain friendly relations with many of them, balancing out each other.
Okay, so you think like India's taken a middle path, like not to left and not to right. So if it goes like to right, so that will be more like aligning with US, and if it does the opposite, it will be more aligning like Russia. Like, so that's what I get from what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in that case, shouldn't India like continue this path, or do you want it to align to any particular group?
See, if India relies too much on the US, I mean, US can play with us. For example, Tejas fighter aircraft, right? India's indigenous fighter aircraft. They have delayed the F404 engine that is used for a Tejas Mk1A, Mark 1A prototype. So they are playing with us basically. If they delay the engines, then the induction of the fighter aircraft will be delayed, and Indian air power will go down, and the power of Indian armed forces will go down. So this is a bargaining chip for them. On the other hand, when we bought the aircraft carrier from Russia, initially they said that the aircraft carrier would be free of cost, but we only have to pay for the scrap metal of the aircraft carrier plus the modifications of the aircraft carrier. We paid some amount, and then they increased the price 3 times or something. They increased the price, and each time they said, if you wouldn't pay up, we will keep the aircraft carrier and the money. They did that to us, and so the thing is, both sides. I mean, it's not reliable to stick only to one side, I would say, because one side can betray you and they will play with you. That is what I mean. They will try to get the maximum out of you. I mean, I'm not an expert, but this is what I'm saying.
I agree to a large part with you, like how India, it in its best interest, it should not align with any of these groups. Well, when each of these poles, whether USA or Russia, like it is out for its own good, and it is using like its so-called allies to its own benefit, then India should continue what it's doing, which is like pursue like an independent foreign policy. So that would be my opinion on this one. India should stay on the course that it is already in to pursue an independent foreign policy and not aligning to any of these poles.
Okay, my last question to Sarabindu.
Yeah.
Sarabindu, you spoke about politics and economy, right? So what is it that Western Europe and United States has done that makes it much more richer and more powerful than Russia and other countries than Eastern Europe? I mean, what is it that it has done economically? Despite of not having oil, Germany is economically better than Russia. I mean, I'm talking about GDP per capita, and the same for France and stuff like that, despite not having natural resources.
Let me answer this question a little bit. So actually,
Rose, if you don't mind, this is out of topic, but we'll just finish. I mean, a separate topic would take away one entire week. That's why I'm just trying to finish in today's topic itself.
Yeah, sure. I could give you like 15 more minutes to sum up, like all of you guys. But at the same time, it won't take like 1 week. We also have Wednesday sessions on 7 p.m. I'm not sure if you were aware of that.
Yeah, we are aware of that, but this is just last question, I would say, from my side.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
So this is actually a very interesting question, and this is related. So as with the Ukraine war also, who is actually economically stronger? Because economic strength will actually transcend to military strength also in that sense. As I said, US was economically the strongest. US had frittered away a lot of its economic strength. It is trying to rebuild back. How? Because if you look at, post Second World War, the entire Europe was devastated. Okay. And Soviet Union was also devastated because Soviet Union had to fight with Germany, Nazi Germany, and actually Soviet Union had 27, I forgot the number, I have to look up, but let's say 27 million Soviets died in defeating Nazi Germany, defending the motherland and defeating Nazi Germany, Hitler's Germany. So everyone actually came to US and took money, the dollar loans. That is why in 1945 we made that dollar is the reserve currency. How it became from pound, because it was pound, because the British was powerful. They had India as the colony. And so that switchover happened in 1945. You see, it's called the Bretton Woods Conference. And everyone took money because everyone was devastated. So you have to take money from someone. And then you actually import goods, merchandise to build your cities back, because cities were all leveled. Europe and Japan also, because of the atom bomb and all the things. So everyone except Soviet Union, everyone took the dollar loan. And then they took the dollar loan, and then they send the gold, their central bank gold, to US, because you take the loan against a gold. It's same way countries act as individuals act. So how much gold? So no, it's the $35 to 1 ounce of gold. That was the exchange rate. Let us say. So exchange rate between dollar and 35 ounce to 1. It is well documented. You took the dollar loan, you imported merchandise from US, you built your cities, you built your factories, you built your productive capabilities. You already have engineering and science to some extent, like Germany had, West Germany, that was West Germany. Now, in 1971, they went back to US and say, hey, we want to pay back the loan and give us back the dollar, the gold. US refused. So that was the Nixon administration, 1971. Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State. So they didn't get back the gold. Only France got back the gold. So France actually literally sent a warship in 1971. Not to fight a battle with US, but to say that, okay, we have come here to take back. France took back its gold. I think UK was always aligned with US, so we are not talking of UK. Rest of Europe didn't get back there. So the gold is still in there. So what they got, so then that is called the gold dollar got delinked. They got delinked. And dollar was linked to something, some physical commodity. What was that? That was oil. Because these guys went, Kissinger and Nixon, to Saudi Arabia, almost put a gun on the head of the crown prince. And, because their royalties, they're very weak. So they had to agree that whatever oil you sell, you have to sell in dollar. So same agreement with Saudi, with Kuwait, with UAE, let's say with Bahrain, all these Gulf states, except Iran. So that is one reason. There are other things which made the dollar the reserve currency of the world, slowly. But we have to remember the Bretton Woods Agreement 1945. We have to remember 1971, when the gold dollar linkage was broken and the petrodollar was born. So these are all well documented. Even in Twitter, you will find a lot of articles on this. If I paste, I'll paste from there only, so you as well can find in Twitter. Now, all I'm saying is the US was a great engineering and manufacturing power till the 80s. But after the petrodollar was born, they wanted to print so much dollars. So there was inflation. So they said, hey, let's do manufacturing outsourcing to China. They sent manufacturing to China so that it's low inflation. I can print money. And the manufacturing went to China. The designs remained with US. But what China did in the 40 years was China slowly reverse engineered. I won't say copying. Copying is a very, very wrong term. In fact, it kind of diminishes the work that China had done. China didn't do original work, we can say, but China did reverse engineer and build the same thing with their own, with their own capabilities and all. And of course, the US factories had also stayed there. Boeing had the factory, Apple had, so all these things happened. So for these 40 years, till COVID broke out, or let's say till 2018, let's say, they were importing from China, and they had almost forgotten every part of engineering and manufacturing except the IC part, where US still has a lead. Even in software, they don't have a lead today, because if US has Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, China has Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. let's say. So bat versus, we call the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, so these, cloud companies. So only in hardware, definitely the chip making, US has an advantage still. But in many respects, US lost this advantage because of that initial outsourcing of manufacturing. Although only manufacturing was outsourced, remember, not the design. But when China became better in design through all these 40 years, China was working all these 40 years in design.
Okay, but by the way, even
so this is the great shift that we are seeing, and this is not being articulated in our polity, in our discussions by the Congress, the BJP, because many of them are not understanding this thing. But this has been, I mean, a lot of Indians also are understanding this, articulating this in Twitter. But I think a lot of Russian, Chinese, and European handles, they are also talking about these things basically. So as I said, economy is all about making your capital goods, and consumer services, because ultimately you will want consumer goods. You will want from me a packet of Maggi, in the morning, because you want to have, noodles as breakfast. But in order to make the packet of Maggi, you have to build that whole supply chain, the packaging machine, the automated machine where, the noodles are being made. So, but there's a factory in Bangalore nearby. ITC has a factory. The machines they have brought from Japan. I mean, but China also has noodle making machines. That machine itself is quite complicated, I'm saying. So I'm saying, what I'm saying is ultimately we need consumer goods or consumer services, but we need capital goods to make these things happen. Now, it's not about machines for war. It's about machines for food, for clothes, for housing, for everything practical. For transportation, we are seeing electric vehicles, metro rail, now, for example, our yellow line locos are coming from China, CRRC. You can just Google, you will find out immediately. Now, all I'm saying is you need all these things to become a very strong economy, to become a pole in the multipolar world. Now, this shift has happened, and US was kind of caught unawares. Now then, see, they have dollars, they have the strength of the dollars, but a lot of productive things have moved to China, and China has become original equipment manufacturer for this. So this is driving, and well, you can't take on China right now, but you can take on Russia, let's say, through Ukraine, and show that you still have military power. You are projecting your military power in a sense in Europe.
I got your point, Sarabindu, but your answer was focused mainly on United States and post World War II. But let's say Western Europe was strong ever since I would say 1800s.
Correct.
Since 1800s, Western Europe was strong.
Exactly.
And United States was strong even before World War II, since World War I that time.
Yeah, right.
And also since after World War II, Japan also bounced back very quickly. Yeah. And also South Korea also became economically strong.
Correct.
So what is the relation? I mean, why is Eastern Europe weak while Western Europe is strong? What is the difference? I'm saying even Eastern Europe was devastated during World War II.
Yeah, right.
More compared to Germany, but still Germany bounced back much more than Eastern Europe.
Correct.
So there are some things that some countries were untouched during World War II, yet they're weaker than countries like Germany and Japan.
Correct.
So what is the reason I was looking for anyway?
Yeah,
you gave only from a US perspective and
so
post World War II.
I'm giving from Europe also. It's a very good question, very good, and you have put the timeline very right. So that is where history and economics tie. So post 1800, the industrial revolution took off in Europe. Actually, it took off in UK the first. UK was the first. Then France in that order. Then Germany. Then US, and last was Soviet Union to kind of industrialize. So in that order, and then we can come. So among the major powers. So the James Watt steam engine actually started, 1776, and we are not independent. I mean, this part was independent of India. That was not India, Tipu Sultan's area. But in Bengal had actually become a British colony, as by 1776. So James Watt steam engine is the start of the modern industrial age, when the medieval age ended, we can say, and the modern age started, the age of machines, right? In software also. Now, Europe continued to industrialize, and for industrialization, all the things that you need were there. You need a liberal democracy. Democracy is very much needed. They needed democracy. They need freedom of speech. They need education and healthcare for population. Those were provided. But there was not too much, that is the argument, concentration of wealth as we are seeing now. So now the concentration of wealth is huge. And that is because of, as I'm saying, coming back, because of this market capitalization point of view, where few not so much in Europe, but in US, but in UK also, because in UK you are seeing kind of riots breaking up. People will say, Muslim versus Christians and all those things. But at the heart is there are few people who are controlling the companies, and you can say they're banks and hedge funds, even in UK's context. They are very powerful. And the people who actually will work, the middle class, who will work for you to build scientific things and goods, they have become lot powerless. That was not the case in Europe post World War II, even post the petrodollar thing, because there's a concept of a middle class Europe, a middle class America. So we are searching, where has that middle class Europe gone? Where has that middle class America gone? So their jobs, I mean, I won't say Europe, let me say UK. Their jobs have been outsourced to China because of earning more profits and making things at a lower cost. So it was the undoing, the great undoing of this manufacturing outsourcing to China, which has actually decimated the middle class and has enriched the hedge funds. By hedge funds, also, I mean the owners of the hedge funds, the majority shareholders. There is no, I'm not mentioning a single person. In US context, I said BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, and then the owners you can find out. So that is basically the great undoing, where the middle class itself has been decimated and it had actually become a lot poorer. So yes, economically they are stronger. They made more machines, they made more technologies, they made more innovations that we are seeing till the other day. Till the other day can be as late as 2008. The 2008 banking crisis also changed this a lot. And I'll give some supporting data also. So this is where China had kind of stolen a march, if you may say so. Now what about Germany and France? Germany and France had held on to those middle classes, middle class. Middle class is like people like us, you and me, let's say. We fancy, we can say we are upper middle class, lower middle class, and all those things, but let's say middle class is a broad category. Germany and France still had that and had that thing. Now, this Ukraine war was also an attempt to, and I'll send you another thing, is an attempt to let Germany not work with China and Russia, because Germany is again a very productive workforce. So US wants Germany and France to work with US more than with China and Russia, which is called the Eurasia. So the Eurasian economy had to be kind of split up so that US can actually build it back. Now, for building it back, actually, US need not split the Eurasian economy. US has to just build back its middle class. And middle class means build back its manufacturing in one sense, which Mr. Biden had tried to do in some sense, but in fits and starts, like, the Inflation Reduction Program of Biden government, which gave huge incentives to Intel to restart manufacturing in Arizona and all. It has started, but Intel, you see the Intel shares and Intel profits. Intel is laying off 15,000 people. Repercussions are in Bangalore also. So all I'm trying to say is that that what US had to do, everyone has come in. I mean, no one is anti-American. Please understand, they're anti basically these huge AMCs controlling these companies. And because of their control and their profits, the middle class is kind of getting decimated. So the middle class has to be built back. The manufacturing has to be built back, and all that needs to be done has to be done. But you can see the debate is being lost in some other things. In US also, we have a debate going on the same in UK. Rishi Sunak lost, right? The Conservative lost, and the Labour came to power. But will the Labour deliver? Because many people have argued in UK, my friends, and it's in Twitter also, that Labour also has the same characteristic as the Conservatives. Why? Because the same hedge funds are controlling both the parties. So what is the solution? Will they build a third? Will they build a third political party in UK, which actually can bring back manufacturing and build back the middle class? These are all questions at this stage. We don't know answers. We will very much like to see the West come up, in that sense, because it has just lost its edge. Whereas in China and Russia, our problem is, even for me also, we don't know much of the system, how the system works. Yes, it's autonomy. You cannot have elections and all, but we know something about China, not at all about Russia, because Russia is still very closed. So what we know about China is, it's of course one party, Communist Party. They have 9 crore members. Anyone can become a member. Even you can become a member out of 140 crore. Now you have to actually rise through the Communist Party by getting votes, in your area, and you have to also deliver. Deliver means you will be given some money and you have to show that you have been able to increase the GDP of that area. So China doesn't believe a lot in the market capitalization thing. The Chinese markets are very much less because we have argued the market cap thing. So if you are given, like, let's say X amount of money, can you grow the GDP faster? That's how China is good. And then if two guys, like for example, you are managing Bangalore and someone is managing Mysore, and the Mysore guy can show greater GDP, over a period of time, he gets a promotion in the Communist Party. So they're saying that they don't need to have democracy because they have created a meritocratic system within the Communist Party. That is the answer. And Xi Jinping has crossed 11 such levels when you become the president of China. So the Communist Party is structured, and at every stage, the promotion is based on the votes you get and the results you achieve. By increasing the GDP, you will be given money allocation for developing, capital goods, consumer goods. That's how we grow GDP, giving employment to people, which in class builds the middle class. Of course, in order to do that, you have to provide healthcare and education. Now, the Chinese have explained a little bit of their system, but the Russians haven't, and we don't know anything about Russia. But the whole game plan, I'm saying, in an economic sense, is how do you build back the middle class? How do you build back jobs? How do you build back education and healthcare? And how do you build back manufacturing and innovation? And engage the population in doing all these things. So that is the game. Now, you can use a Western liberal democracy format to achieve this. You can use the Chinese one party, as they claim, meritocratic inside Communist Party style to achieve that. These may be various ways and means, but the end goals are kind of this: in order to build a robust GDP, because if you build a robust GDP, you build a robust tax base. If you build a robust tax base, you have money to spend on military, even military R&D. As you are saying, for health, and then you can build for healthcare and education. So the goal we know, but the means are the things on which we have a lot of debate and differences and discussions. And of course, we are saying this is a communist system, this is a capitalist system, and all these things. Now you can label the means by various tags: communism, capitalism, all these things. But the goals we know, that the goals are manufacturing, goals are innovation, goals are employing as many people as possible, because not everyone will be innovating, but when some people will be doing manufacturing and all, there will be a lot of other employment which will happen. Someone will sell food, someone will sell clothes, someone will sell housing, someone will sell, but things have to sell, right? And for things to sell, people have to have money. And for people have to have money, people have to have earnings, right? So money cannot be locked up in the stock market valuation. If money is locked up in the stock market valuation, then people don't have money to transact. So that is the argument. And I think there is a broad consensus even across US and China, which are kind of staring down at each other, but not the population. A lot of people in US actually like the Chinese model, and a lot of Chinese actually like the US model. And among those people who like the models, the good points of both this thing, they are saying that this has to be the model. The money cannot be locked up in stock market, creating excessive valuation, for hedge funds, and there has to be valuation. I'm not saying there won't be valuation, but excessive valuation. Like, for example, US market cap today is you can check 195% of the GDP. India's is 150% of the GDP. China's is much lesser, at least 61% of the GDP it is going perhaps. Now, what is the right figure? Well, we don't know what is the right figure. But we must know what is the right figure, because that much money will come out of the stock market and will be in productive economy for creating goods and services, right? So I think that is the core of the economic argument. And the war also is kind of related to that economic argument in some sense. I mean, you cannot actually take away the war from the economic argument.
Okay, fine. Raghav, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we're done, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I guess thanks Sarabandhu for joining. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but
yeah, that's
I think
fine.
yeah. Hopefully we can join again, and we can have productive conversations. Hope you had a good session today.
Right. Correct.
Okay, great. All right, guys.
I'll try to upload some of the videos also that I have seen very useful, and my friends have passed. And I mean, I have friends both in US and in China, so I keep on getting material and balancing that. So I'll keep some of these, and you guys can have a look, and then you can think that what is, because we don't know the right answer, but we know certain things have to be changed, both in China and both in USA and in Russia also, for it to become better. We always strive to build a better world, right? So
yeah. And please do invite more people to join in the conversation. Whoever you believe would be benefiting from joining in a group like this, or whoever you think would contribute to a group like this, that'd be great. We want to expand in. We want to include everybody to come in with different perspectives, not just the people who you agree with, especially people who disagree with you.
Always.
Yeah.
So that is the core democracy. Core democracy
Yes.
thing is to
Raghav, can you stop recording?
Okay, hold on.